The Sustainable Development Goals define very clear targets the world needs to hit in order to achieve peace, prosperity, and freedom for all people. Currently, we are absolutely not on track to reach these goals. But there is an unlikely savior that might accelerate our progress and allow us to over-deliver massively on the SDG ambitions. Let's discuss how investing in disruptive technological innovation might be the most effective form of impact investing. Hello world! This is the Impact Investing Show, where we invest in a future for all conscious creatures. I'm Lennart Schelter, welcome to the show. So, can obvious and blatant capitalism help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals faster or even at all? A white paper by Cathie Wood's company ARK Invest argues it certainly can. So, let's see how this might work and how reusable rocket technology influences increased agricultural production in emerging countries. We're going to start with an introduction to the 5 innovation platforms identified by ARK and how they connect to the SDGs. Afterwards, we're going to look at 3 specific examples and discuss the technologies and their impact in more detail. Finally, I'm going to tell you what I think the paper is missing, which might be the best opportunity of all of them. The original white paper by ARK Invest is linked below, and I highly recommend checking it out for more details. First up, a short recap on the SDGs. The Sustainable Development Goals are a collection of ambitions agreed upon in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly to end poverty, protect the planet, sustain economic growth, and lay the infrastructure for peace and prosperity in 2030. The UN General Assembly consists of 193 member states that all have equal votes. That means virtually all countries of the world are included and agreed upon these goals, which is really a noteworthy achievement on its own. Each goal has a number of sub-goals and clearly defined indicators of how progress towards that goal is measured. For example, the sub-goal for goal number 1, no poverty, states, by 2030, eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured as people living on less than $1.25 a day. And the corresponding indicator states, proportion of the population living below the international poverty line by sex, age, employment status, and geographic location. And this is defined for every goal, so there was a lot of thought put into these goals, which is why they are such a universal starting point for sustainability-interested projects or impact investors as well. ARK believes that the 5 innovation platforms they identified can substantially accelerate the achievement of the development goals. But what are these platforms? There are 5 innovation platforms identified in ARK's framework: robotics, artificial intelligence, energy storage, DNA sequencing, and blockchain technology. You can see some exemplary technologies in these figures like 3D printing or blockchain technology. Today we are going to look at 3 specific examples and see how they connect to the Sustainable Development Goals: reusable rockets, electric vehicles, and liquid biopsies. Let's start with the current status of the SDG implementation. The UN Chief of the Statistical Services Branch, Francesca Pierucci, noted, quote, "Almost all areas where you see progress, if you look at the rate or the pace of progress, it is never sufficient to meet the targets." ARK's white paper argues that the impact of disruptive innovation in changing the pace of progress might be underestimated here and that achieving of the Sustainable Development Goals is possible. In the paper, ARK prepared an interesting matrix connecting the 5 innovation platforms to the 17 SDGs. The 5 platforms, artificial intelligence, blockchain, DNA sequencing, energy storage, which includes autonomous electric vehicles, and finally robotics, are found at the top. On the left, you see all 17 development goals grouped in 4 categories. The darker the purple in the matrix, the stronger ARK believes the technology innovation will influence progress in this particular development goal. To get a detailed impression of this, I highly recommend reading the original paper, of course. It's freely available on the ARK website, linked in the description below. Some of these impacts are not immediately obvious. How, for example, do reusable rockets strongly influence the goal of zero hunger? They actually provide plenty of explanations and examples in the report as well. In the case of reusable rockets, it will be the satellite internet that will provide connectivity even in the most remote regions and could thus help with increasing agricultural productivity. Yeah, I could see how that could happen. Other interesting examples are Bitcoin to enable the strongest form of property rights, leading to better economic growth, or increased economic convergence through digital wallets, largely powered by AI, or cloud-based online education, effectively opening infrastructure for education and amplifying the reach of superstar teachers. However, one point stuck out negatively as well. That is, gene-edited aquaculture can reduce pressure on global fish stocks. Now, the statement in itself is not wrong, but aquaculture is an absolutely horrible idea, as I have explained in detail in my video on the global fishing industry, also linked in the description. So go watch it afterwards to see what alternatives we have that use a fraction of the resources and produce none of the animal suffering. Okay, so let's look at 3 case studies in some more detail here to better understand how innovation impacts progress towards the SDGs. The first one is quite obvious: reducing oil demand and greenhouse gas emissions through adoption of electric vehicles. This obviously facilitates Goal 13, climate change. There are currently 1.4 billion cars on the road and 99.5% of them still burn fuel. This emits massive amounts of greenhouse gas emissions, estimated to use up 20% of our remaining carbon dioxide budget to stay under the 1.5 degree target in this decade. This is where the innovation comes in. Declining costs of lithium-ion batteries, new manufacturing breakthroughs like gigacasting, and not to forget the volatile and regularly skyrocketing fuel prices and dependency on certain countries for oil supply, make electric vehicles the de facto best choice for most use cases. The ARK white paper is a little more conservative here, but I would argue that for most people an electric vehicle is already by far the better choice compared to a combustion engine vehicle. However, as you can see in this figure from the white paper, the reductions from increased use of electric vehicles is not yet exactly tipping the scale. This is where another innovation comes into play: artificial intelligence. More precisely, autonomous driving based on an AI algorithm mastering real-world vision. And with autonomous driving, there will be robotaxis. In the white paper, ARK estimates that robotaxis can be profitably priced at around 25 cents per mile, which is cheaper than the amortized costs of a personal vehicle, which they estimate at 30 cents per mile. That means people get the same mobility from point to point without the upfront costs of financing a vehicle, paying for parking, maintenance, and so on. In addition, people will not have to focus on driving and can work, watch movies, sleep, read, play with their girlfriend, whatever. These robotaxis will reduce miles driven in combustion engine vehicles much more than just electric vehicles alone, as presented in this figure from the white paper. ARK expects a reduction in driven miles in combustion engine vehicles of more than 75%. On to our second example, cancer detection. In 2020, more than 10 million people died from cancer. The death rate might be decreased by 25% by using early detection blood tests that can diagnose a cancer before it metastasizes and becomes harder to treat and much more dangerous. And these blood tests could become a reality thanks to innovation in synthetic biology, machine learning, and next-generation sequencing techniques. These blood-based sequencing tests, also known as liquid biopsies, can identify cancer tumors earlier and for reduced costs compared to traditional imaging techniques by searching for fragments of mutated DNA. This figure shows the development since 2015 and the possible cost reductions that might be realized through innovation. In 2015, a liquid biopsy pan-cancer test was around $30,000. The current costs, according to estimates in the white paper, are around $1,500 and could fall as low as just $250 in the next 5 years since the release of the paper. This readily available early detection would be a major step towards transforming cancer from a killer to a chronic disease. Eventually, costs will decline even further, making it accessible to more and more people in the world, and potentially reducing cancer mortality worldwide, a significant contribution to the Sustainable Development Goal 3, good health and well-being. The final example concerns goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, and the innovation connected to it are digital wallets. Digital wallets allow money management using basic mobile phones, and thus provide a crucial entry point for financial inclusion. Mobile phones have spread rapidly around the world, even into the most remote areas where no traditional bank branches are available, allowing people from developing regions especially to receive remittance payments, for example. Digital wallets are quickly reducing the global rate of unbanked people. Many positive effects have been reported in connection with the adoption of digital wallets, the most striking of which is the reduction in costs of financial services. The average remittance costs associated with sending just $200 from South Africa to Nigeria are 14.5%. Remittance payments are most often private payments from family members working in higher wage countries and sending money back home. For many emerging countries, these private payments are an indispensable portion of their entire economy. So these costs of 14.5% paid to banks simply to transfer the money matter big time. Companies offering digital wallets profit from online-only business models and have drastically lower customer acquisition costs. Square, for example, the company behind the digital wallet service Cash App, reports customer acquisition costs of only $5, whereas ARK suggests that traditional banks pay around $1,000 for a new customer. This makes banking previously unprofitable customers profitable and can provide financial inclusion to previously unbanked people, all thanks to innovations in mobile phone technology and some software in the form of digital wallets. In conclusion, ARK is really convinced of the role of innovation in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. They even go so far as to say the 5 innovation platforms are the United Nations' best hope for achieving the SDGs by 2030. The white paper ends on a really optimistic and positive note. They postulate that the economic convergence, meaning the reduction of differences between developing and rich economies, will accelerate. Digital wallets allowing finance to become more inclusive, reusable rockets enabling internet access almost everywhere, collapsing costs of food through gene editing and artificial intelligence, autonomous electric vehicles offering cheap mobility, and distributed ledgers, aka cryptocurrencies, allowing governing bodies to track and hold global actors accountable more efficiently are just some of the examples that innovation can bring to the Sustainable Development Goals. And what can I say? I totally agree. Except for the fact that ARK has not mentioned cellular agriculture and its tremendous potential for accelerating the achievement of many Sustainable Development Goals at all. If you're new to cellular agriculture, it's the production of agricultural products, mostly animal products, using microorganisms instead of animals, and bioreactors instead of slaughterhouses. I made a bunch of videos on its advantages and how it can help us achieve a better future faster. So if you're interested in the possibilities of CellAg, check out this video next where I covered the latest IPCC report on climate change that also mentions CellAg as a potential solution for climate change mitigation. And as always, if you liked the video, do all the clicky stuff, you know the game. And because there is so much going on in the cellular agriculture field, I will see you in the next one.